Fiends, friends, and familiars. This is your old pal Matt Orozco from Macabre Daily, and I'm joined by my buddy Lowell. Lowell, how are you?
I'm good, Matt. How goes it?
It goes. It goes back to 1990, actually. If I'm gonna try out my new little
Hey,
transition, heyo, because yeah, air horn. Brr. Um, but now that I've properly ruined that awful transition, and made it better with jokes, I could say that the reason we're here today is because we got sent a copy of the In Search of Darkness 1990 to 1994 documentary, which I think a lot of folks who are watching this or who are just happening upon this because of the algorithm will know because of it being having just done a trilogy of 80s films. So I originally asked Lowell, hey, Lowell, why don't you write a review about this? And then I looked at the runtime and it's 6 hours and 5 minutes. And I'm like, how would one even write a review that could encapsulate how much content is in here? So thought we'd talk about it. What do you think, Lowell?
I am very glad we are doing that. Also, because I find it's just better to talk about these things with people
Yeah.
sometimes, especially when it's like a sprawling talking head documentary like this. But that's me.
No, no, I'm with you. I think that's my realization as well. I was like, wow, not only is this long, but there's so many things you could talk about. We're not even going to possibly cover it all. But that's kind of the blessing of something like this is that you really can just take it in pieces, come back to it occasionally, like a warm blanket, you know. But anyway, before we get going here, just to reframe everyone's our understanding of In Search of Darkness, you can head over to 90shorrordoc.com. Go check out all the information about picking up a digital copy now. It's, I think, 29 bucks. Pretty good deal, a digital download right away to your inbox. And it's a great value as far as how much content you're getting. Like I said, 6 hours. That's a lot of content. So, and well produced content at that, not just filler. But with that in mind, let's get to what we were thinking. So, Lo, what were kind of just high level, what did you think about the documentary in total?
I loved it. I I've gone on record as saying that, the first one I thought was kind of boilerplate and wasn't quite for me, but to me, they really figured out their groove with two and three. I love two and three. Might also be because they're maybe not more obscure horror films. I mean, some are, but they're ones that aren't talked about as much. But they still give the same level of thought and care to all of their entries. So a standard has been established, and I think with 90 to 94 it definitely continues. It's more of the same, but in the best possible way.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. I feel like one was Baby Giraffe, like all right, we have a lot of ideas, but it's very unfocused because I don't think that anyone, and I would venture to guess, I'm not putting words in mouths here, but I'd imagine they didn't expect they were going to get a trilogy out of this, so they were going to do a whole like this is the 80s, but I think now what they found is a groove of trying to find it, breaking it up into time, like time periods. And now with the 1994, I think I want to say perfected, but I think they've found that groove, that what they're going for as far as something that's repeatable, um, and effective. So yeah, I'm a big fan. This stuff is like catnip. I just can't get, well, not like catnip, more like cocaine because catnip cats get fed up enough with. They actually have a natural limiting to that. Did you know that? Strange. They
Yeah.
can't like OD on
Cats
catnip.
are evil. I don't mess with cats. I'm a dog person.
Listen,
No
cats aren't
shade.
all that bad.
I love you. You're doing the world a favor by hurting all the cats. I'm a dog herder myself.
Yeah, well, we all got to tend to our flocks, but um, with that, yeah, so I think we both, both big fans. So what were some of the things that you took away as like real big highs? What were some of the things like standouts?
I actually really loved the intro and like the laying of the groundwork because these all have like a very specific structure of like film, 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 and then sort of between the decades, they cover a new topic about film, like the CGI at the time. And they sort of tie it to now by like talking about fears of AI. So I'm kind of I do love the structure, but there were some just great talking points. Like going back to cocaine, I think it was Anne. Oh God, I forget the bleeding skull talking head who was,
Oh yeah, Ann Choi, I think it is.
yeah, she's used throughout, and she says like, if the '80s were cocaine, the '90s were heroin, and
Yeah.
I was so much sense, at least the first part of the '90s. But it was just kind of cool to see, like, okay, we've survived the '80s, we got through it, and the '90s are kind of like, now what? Some people don't know the party's over. Some people don't know the party's changing. Some people are ready to change right away. And I feel like the '90s, specifically this part of the '90s, isn't really a topic in many like archival documentaries or even something people really talk about at all, except for a few specific movies. So it was really great to see it go in depth here.
Yeah, I mean, I think the 90s are the new, this sounds lame, but it's like the 90s are the new 80s for as far as how we're looking at horror. And I think this sends the message that there's a lot of underappreciated horror from the 90s, much like a lot of people looked at, people who grew up on 70s horror looked at 80s horror to some extent, like, this thing seems a bit excessive or a bit eccentric. So I think to that end, the highs here are always just the people they get. I would single out again, and it's Annie Choi. She is just the use of her throughout wasn't just great, but also the perspective on things like shot on video horror, and the coverage of things like a lot of like German underground stuff, which I don't really like. I'm not a big fan of like Schramm and like Necromantic and those movies, but I really loved hearing about his story about how Germany tried to censor his second movie, and he was in court for like years battling this, and then finally he won. And when he won, it made it so much easier for his next movie to get made, which was like in some ways like more objectionable because they felt bad about harassing him. So there's these little stories about people that were there. Adam Marcus talking about comparing the Jason Goes to Hell um, cover art to penises. I'm like, God damn it, now I can't unsee it.
I'm
Um,
surprised anyone could see anything else. I mean,
it,
what did you
yeah,
think?
I mean, the thing is, I just never took it as that because like you, I saw Freddy's Dead at a very young age, and I'm like, oh yeah, little squirmy things that look like demons, those are just demons. And then
Yeah.
you go to sex ed in like sixth, seventh grade, and all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, wait,
No.
horror is horny. God damn it. Um, so yeah,
Come on. Terrible.
but, but I do think like they also had a lot more people this time around who I think are a little bit harder to get. Like they had oh my God, Michael Baldwin from Phantasm. And like I've met Michael Baldwin a couple times because fucking love Phantasm. And like, but I would never expect that he would get a chance to talk about Phantasm 3 in this. Hearing from Don Mancini talking about his view on the Child's Play films as they evolved through that early stage.
And on Leprechaun, where he's like, yeah, I guess they did kind of take from it, but it's also fun. It's interesting to hear people that you know from like one lane of horror, like maybe like a certain project or a certain franchise, just comment on other franchises that were popular at the time to be like, yeah, there was kind of some intersection. You don't feel too often that people are just being like, okay, why don't you talk about this one? And they're like, well, they pick sort of the right people to talk about the right movies for the most part.
And they let him cook, right? Like they're like, yeah, talk whatever. Like Mike Flanagan gets a lot of talk time, and I think he's reached the goal that he would. I feel like his goal at some point was just to get to talk about and watch and write horror movies for the rest of his life, and I feel like he's reached that because he's doing a lot of like just it seems to be maybe it's recency bias, but I think he's just doing a lot more promotion of himself and getting out there. And he's got so many great things to say. In fact, he called out something about the line in Needful Things that Ed Harris says is like, note that, when Max von Sydow asks him, like, oh, can I help you find anything? And he's like, no, I think I'm good. I'm happy with things that are. He's like, that little line says so much about that character. I'm like, damn, I never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
So just fascinating stuff. But to that end, do you think there were any low points from your viewing?
Actually, to what I said before about picking the right people, it's not every single time. Like sometimes, they talk about a movie and maybe they couldn't get anyone for it or no one really cared to talk about it. So, you have someone who's kind of like trying to cook, making it up on the spot, and you can kind of tell they're like, I don't know why I'm talking about this one, but yeah, 90s horror. And it's like, yeah, okay. But then you know what? That's over and we're on to the next one. Um, and for the horror films that are talked about more than the others, like the big hits of the day, it's still interesting to listen to them, but I find myself going, okay, I kind of know this one. What's next? What's
Mm.
what's the next VHS cover that I saw at the video store where I never actually saw the movie, but I was always fascinated by? Like, where's that one?
Yeah, and I think that's almost like I try and like view that as because I feel the same way. There's like but I think it's also we spend so much of our time immersed in this beforehand that for us, like some of this is redundant because we've been reading it, we've been hearing like some of these stories you've been hearing for a while. But I also like to look at it as some people, this will be their entryway to
Mhm.
finding out about some of these movies. Because you and I grew up at a time when documentaries like this were not readily available or being made that much. Like I think Terror in the Isles came out before we were both born.
Yeah, like 81 or something.
Yeah. And they had some stuff on TV here and there, but like I don't remember watching any of it. I usually found out about it later years on YouTube. But we found out through like books from like Leonard Maltin, not Leonard Maltin's a terrible example, but emblematic of what I mean is like books from regarded movie critics who would like basically write these voluminous like here's every review of every movie. I had a horror one. I was actually looking for it a few days ago and I can't find it. I might have gotten rid of it, but it was a little black and purple book and I used to carry it around with me all the time. You know what I'm
Oh,
talking about.
I think I might have had that because I always got the Leonard Maltin movie guide every year for my birthday. But there was one, oh God, it's black. There's like purple lettering, and I think
Yeah.
like stock on the cover. Yeah, I mean, I know I got rid of it because it was just like ashes.
Yeah, no, mine thing was like riddled with like notes and I mean it basically was I mean I carried it around like a pastor carried a Bible. So I think that like to me like this is kind of that for the next iterate like the next generation is like I don't know how many people are going to go to voluminous movie reviews that are kind of paragraphs at most, a paragraph at most. Um but on the like but I do agree that like some of these are things we've heard before.
But that's
And
also kind of how I feel about like the first film. Like, even though maybe I was a little disappointed in it, like I know that's someone's like, that's horror 101. That's someone's
right.
like primer for what this is. So it's not so much like, they didn't have anything interesting to say. It was just like maybe it was nothing new for us because we've heard it all before. But like for newer people, for people who are a little newer to this, it's easy for them to jump in with it, which is kind of why I like two, three, and this a little bit better because the films they talk about are held in just about the same esteem, but you don't really hear much from them, every day.
Yeah. And I would, as I was thinking about lows, like I was like, I don't really know if I have any specific lows, but because I would love to say something like, oh, I wish they would have covered, but I can't really think of many things that they missed.
Yeah, we're in
Um,
the tank for this. It's okay to just be honest about it. And also, I mean, I have a mild fascination with this specific period of horror, the pre-90s, the pre-Scream 90s
right.
horror, like where I said like,
The full moon era.
yeah, yeah, it's like it is kind of like the Wild West in general because until Scream came along, there was like no guiding star really, and everyone's kind of just throwing stuff at a wall to see what sticks. And it's all, yeah, like except for maybe like Full Moon, people don't really, it's not really looked upon and discussed. It's for a lot of people, the horror 90s started with Scream. And of course that's false, but like it's great to finally see like here it is.
Yeah. And they also give, I think, a lot of credit to movies that have been underserved, like Popcorn. Um, like it gets a really good coverage, and like I love that they get Jill Schloen to talk about it. Um, and So yeah, as we've already talked about, like the previous entries, I think they've found their formula. I think this is what, I like this groove that they found. I love the deviations in particular. The emphasis on I have a suspicion that we're going to get more because there was a kind of a noticeable lack of diversity unless it was German, like German or American was the predominant focus. But I would think that we're going to be getting toward the part of the 90s where we're getting into the J horror. So I hope that they do a good coverage of that in the second half, which is what I'd like to see. Um, and that's really the only thing, like, as far as stuff missing, it's the only thing I'd say was missing is I just would love to see more global presence. But I also can't name anything off the top of my head that's like, wow, they really missed that one. Um,
Yeah, but they did have a kind of a global presence in the last one too. I mean, they went into, Tetsuo and
they did a lot of Italian stuff. They did a lot of Italian stuff.
yeah, like there's that, I guess it was kind of more like lip service before, but they really like, put themselves into it. But I think like as it becomes more aware to American audiences, like in the time period, they'll cover it more. Like if they ever do like In Search of the 2000s, that's going to be like half J horror.
Right. Yeah, and it's gonna be all millennial nasties. That'll be Ari's Ariel's chance to shine. But um yeah, I feel like I have nothing like I in some cases like I would love them to cover more, but also I don't know how much longer you can make something like this before people are like, all right, we gotta edit this. Like in some ways, I'm still like a glutton for more of this. So I would love to see what didn't get shown. Are there any movies they didn't cover? Um, but anything that you were surprised that they included, like things that you're like, I'm baffled that they would include this.
Um, I guess off the top of my head, I'm thinking, well, I guess the suckling has risen to prominence, or prominence, I guess you'd call that.
Since Vinegar Syndrome released it.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing. Like Vinegar Syndrome does kind of like dredge a lot of stuff up from the bottom to show into the light. And I was kind of surprised that got in there, but also, and I was also fascinated just by this entry in particular, but Meridian, the full moon and the beast, because I'm like, of all the full moon movies, like that one, okay. But then when they did the factoid about reusing the wolf suit from Bram Stoker's Dracula. I mean, you know me, I love my horror trivia. I feel like I've heard mostly everything, but that like blew my mind.
Yeah, right. And
Like,
Charles Band's like, of course we're gonna use it.
yeah,
Or no, it was the effects guy who was working on Dracula, I
yeah,
think.
Academy Award winning Greg Canham,
Yeah.
who's just like, yeah, just we'll take out the face, but like everything else, and oh, and I mean that blew my mind. And when Charles Band's like, statute of limitations, I'm like, I don't know, but the whole segment on Bram Stoker's Dracula, where they're talking to the screenwriter, James V. Hart, was just awesome. Like
Yeah.
I don't know any of that. I want to like do a deeper
When he
dive.
owned Sony, he's like, I own the Sony lot. I had Hook on one end and I had Dracula on the other.
That's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, actually, on that note, they also had these are also good documentaries to help kind of remind you how many accomplishments some of these screenwriters and directors have. Like Stephen Volk, holy shit. I did not realize all the things that he had his hands in, from like Ghostwatch, all the way through Natural Born. Not we didn't do Natural Born Killers, but he um, shit. I'm drawing a blank. I just had my point, and then I'm uh,
No, but I know what you mean because I think the lat in part two or three, I think three, they did the Sleepaway Camp sequels two and three, and they said Michael Hitchcock actually wrote them under a pseudonym. Do you know who Michael Hitchcock is?
no,
He's a hilarious gay comedic actor. He's in like most of the Christopher Guest films. Like he's one of those people you know his face if you saw him. And and he's just hilarious. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, and he wrote it under a pseudonym. And like I knew the name of the pseudonym, but I had no idea it was actually him. And it was like, oh my God, That's and he did commentaries as the student, like as the pseudonym. And then I listen to the commentaries, and it's like him. It is him. I'm like, how did I miss this? Just stuff like that. Like you don't know how many hands are in each other's are in their jar, each other's honey jars. You know.
Yeah, so this is why I remember Stephen Volk so much. It's like he wrote Gothic for Ken Russell,
Mhm.
which is God, those stupid fucking emojis from Apple. I hate them so much. Uh,
Have them.
he wrote The Guardian with
Oh yeah.
Friedkin, and the Friedkin stories are like, oh yeah, the trees. It's the trees. Like it's just hilarious shit like that, where he's like, and all of a sudden he gave him that idea about the trees, and he's like, oh yeah, it's the trees that are evil. Um, and then he wrote Ghostwatch. So like I think it's a fun reminder of what some of these folks have done. And like for my surprising inclusions, there are two. One is Hiroku the Goblin, the Tsukamoto film. That's such a weird fucking movie, and I am like baffled that they included it just because it's like so out of left field. Super fun movie, but very just out there. And then near the back half, they talk about Natural Born Killers, and I don't consider Natural Born Killers to be a horror film.
Yeah.
Um, I consider it to be an exploitation film for sure, but I file that under like the action category. If I had to be like gun to head,
Even thriller. I
yeah.
mean, and it's like you're not want for runtime. It's already 6 hours. You could have taken it out, but
And
now
then
my
they
dog.
do have a nice section on like thrillers, which I thought was nice about like they talk about The Vanishing, Cape Fear. Um,
Yeah, that was cool. How it and like it is a horror movie, but we're gonna call it a thriller so it doesn't
yeah,
get that whole thing, which is still happening today.
yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and actually, it's funny now. Sometimes they're trying to cast things as horror movies that aren't really horror movies. It's
Mhm.
just because that, sometimes horror will sell. But with that said, expectations for the next entry. So, is there anything you would like to see them change, do differently, or just keep, you know, full steam ahead, don't change a thing?
I mean, I don't know because this specifically the next entry they're going to the latter half of the 90s
It's
is
huge.
it's huge, but it's like so slasher and meta heavy and when you're entering Dimension Posterville, all those floating heads appear in all those same movies. Like what happens if you can't get Joshua Jackson? Like you're gonna lose like a half hour of runtime right there. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it'll be cool to examine it. I think, God, was it Alexandra West or Alexandra Heller Nicholas? I forget, but she wrote a book about the 90s slasher cycle, sort of like Millennial Nasties, but for the 90s, which is really good. So I hope they get her on there. But like, it just seems genre-wise so incestuous. I mean, I'm sure
Mhm.
there are people out there who are like, well, there's Deep Rising, there's Phantoms. I'm like, well, yeah, but that's 1 year. So I'm curious to see how they're going to expand it because it doesn't seem like you're going to cover a lot of ground without repeating yourself. But who are we kidding? We're going to watch the hell out of it.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think as far as like any suggestions we have come with heaps of love because there really isn't like it's not like there's much to even tweak or change. If you were to give us the same thing you just gave us for a different set of years, I would eat it up. Um, but there are a couple things I think would be interesting to explore. One, I did not really think about your point just now about how many slashers there are, but also there's a good opportunity to focus on like how the direct to video implications of that because this was also the time when like DVD was starting to take over for VHS,
Yeah.
and I just watched Stir of Echoes actually last night and I'm like that's a damn fucking good movie that just got buried by Sixth Sense.
I
um
just said that on a Zoom last night. Yeah, no, it's great. It's like one of the forgotten gems of the 90s.
and same with when Heather Langenkamp said about New Nightmare, she's like fucking Pulp Fiction opened the same weekend as fucking New Nightmare.
I know,
So
God.
it's like, and but again, she's got a good heart about it. She's like, it found its audience eventually, which is like if every horror creator could put something on their gravestone, it's like eventually my work found an audience after I died, or at least later in my life. But I want what would be cool to incorporate is I love the fan perspectives at the end, and I feel like there's an opportunity to like dig deep into like the I don't want to call it influencer, but more like the journalist expertise. If you want to have us on, by the way, we will happily to accept any invitation to talk about any movie, no matter how good or bad. I don't care. But I would love to hear from like people like us, who are either noted, experts that are writing reviews for things, the people that do the essays for Second Sight, for Vinegar Syndrome.
Arrow and all of them. I'm telling you now, Scout Tafoya, find him and put him on there. He wrote a book about Toby Hooper, and he has a whole YouTube or and Vimeo series called The Unloved about films that were sort of overlooked at the time, that he reconsiders. A lot of them are genre films, and excuse me, I think he honestly he should have been in this from the beginning, but excuse me, yeah, but there's tons of people like that out there.
And I think that hearing from them, it's like sometimes and they had some of that, they had
Yeah, they
Angel
have
from
both.
Fangoria,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Jessica Dwyer from Horror Hound. Um, I would love to see more of the boutique label people as well. Like I loved hearing from David Gregory.
Oh,
um,
he's one of the best. I can't remember if he was in one of the earlier In Search of Darknesses,
I think
but
he might
he
have been
was
in the third one, but he knows so much, like
yeah.
about like, and when he was talking about Dark Waters and stuff, it's just like he knows so much about these filmmakers, and it's because I feel comfortable enough saying like he does know these people. Like he has met them and like talked to them about these movies. And that's why I think,
But
people like Amy Choi was so interesting. It's like because her love of those bleeding skulls, a very specific type of niche. But it's the stuff that like AGFA is constantly putting out. And so there's so much there. And I think the more they talk about these little kind of deviations from mainstream, the better it gets, whether that comes from the people that they have talking about it who are deviated from the mainstream, or you have just the content itself being somewhat off and more into the underground. So I just can't wait for it. Um, and I'm sure it'll be great when it comes out. So any other closing thoughts from you, Lowell?
uh no, not really. I will just say honestly, when I saw the 6 hour runtime, my knee-jerk reaction was wow, that's a lot. But then my reaction immediately after was like, I'd watch 8 hours of this. Let's be real, you know?
Honestly, I think just having this stuff on, like it is a comfort, and it's, I think it's just because we're absolute horror nerds, right? It's just like having this stuff on and a constant stream of cool information about the things you love. I mean, what could be better? So yeah, they could make this could be a channel. I'd watch it all the time. Just
I
horror documentaries.
Thank God 2 and 3 are on Shutter. I mean, I watched them before, but I like to keep them on while I'm working just to like, have like the constant stream of like horror and trivia just in my head. They're great. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, like In Search of Darkness is just full steam ahead, you know.
Yep. Agree. Well, reminder to all watching this, please go ahead and pick up your copy of In Search of Darkness at 90shorrordoc.com. It's cheap. It's $30. You get 6 hours of content and you get some bonus stuff. There's a soundtrack, there's a booklet. So yeah, it's well worth your money. And let us know what you think. Are there any movies they missed? Are there anything that you'd like to see included in the next round? And yeah, I just can't imagine how long that Scream segment's going to be. The Scream and the I Know You What You Did Last Summer segments are going to be like an hour long. So,
Yeah.
um, or the Scream and its sequels, because I think they all came out before 2000, except for four.
Uh, one and two, well, hold on. Let's break it down now. One, two, I know what you did. I still know what you did. Uh, Not three. Three was
Yeah, it was
2000.
three, it was 2000.
But The Faculty, um, yeah. I mean, I guess maybe that doesn't sound like a lot in the grand scheme of things,
No,
but
but it's the
Urban Legend,
splintering off. Urban Legend, Valentine.
that was
Um,
2001, but yeah,
oh,
yeah.
okay.
Uh-huh.
So there's going to be like I feel like it's those like the DV. I hope there's a really great direct to video
Oh, there are.
segment because
Yeah.
that's when this stuff really kicks off.
And maybe like an interstitial segment about like Masters of Horror or the After Dark Film Fest. Not
Oh
representing
yeah.
horror, but like there was sort of like a pop up and direct to DVD, like you said.
Yeah. Oh, Masters of Horror. God, I could watch. I mean, those were just a gift, but we could talk about those another day, all day. In fact, we could do a top Masters of Horror episodes. I think that's a great idea. So, anyways, off topic, back to 90s Horror Doc. Check it out, go buy it now. And from your good pals here at Macabre Daily, heavily approved. But above all things, be good, stay safe, and watch more horror movies. Adios.
Later.